The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with somebody who's not quite famous, called Ivan. So, Ivan, if you can tell us where and when you were born, and if you could describe what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. So, Ivan, you're in the room.
Tim, great to see you, man.
And
I don't know
you?
if you can tell. I don't know if you can tell from my accent. I'm a Yank.
No.
A Yank. Yeah.
But you're almost in England if you're on the sort of eastern seaboard there.
Oh, yeah. Just a short boat ride away.
Absolutely. It is a boat ride.
It is, absolutely. I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States of America, back in the deep South in the mid-'60s, 1964. It's a beautiful part of the southeastern United States where we're in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. So it was really gorgeous part of the country. The hardwoods, when they change the fall colors, like it just is this explosion of color around you, the ambers and yellows. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. I grew up.
Mirrors the what's the northern area in the fall? Come to in a second.
The Lake District.
No, further north.
Further north.
Yeah,
well, the Appalachian Mountain Range goes all the way from the south all the way up through New York's the Adirondacks and that area up there. So, it's very,
New
very
England
similar.
In the fall, that's it.
Yes.
And
yes.
Where the trees are changing colour. I guess it's the same down where you are.
It is, but they get it a little earlier in the year because they're a little colder up north, kind of thing. So but it's this beautiful explosion of color, really, really nice and interesting. But neither of my parents are from Tennessee. My mother's from New York City, and my father was from Palo Alto, California. They met in New York City in the early '60s. My dad got an engineering job with the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was the public utility company that the government ran. It was a FDR New Deal program. He was a mechanical engineer. He got a job with them, and he had that one job for his entire career and retired from that same position down there. Wow. So, I tell people I'm the child of a secular Jew and a devout atheist. So we were kind of raised with no existential dilemma at all. Just kind of like we don't even sort of think about it. It's kind of like we have the cultural things on my mother's side. My dad's just kind of like, he's a rebel. He was an outdoorsman. He liked to really go camping and hiking and canoeing and that kind of stuff. Really interesting guy. He's sadly just passed about 2 years ago, but really had a full, interesting life.
Did he take you along into the woods?
Oh, every weekend. Yeah. No, I grew up,
or
well, a little both. I really enjoyed like the canoeing and kayaking kind of thing, running whitewater. But he would go year round. So, when we're out there in the dead of winter and it's, the high is going to be like 12 degrees Fahrenheit outside. I was not into it at all, but I was there, it was good sort of survivalist kind of training. And then in the summer, of course, it's great fun, being in the water all the time. But so I grew up a little bit of an oddball for Tennessee, like there weren't too many Jewish people down there, and there. So I went to public schools which in America we mean the government-run school. We call the public schools up through about first year of junior high school. And then the public schools in Chattanooga, Tennessee were a little bit lacking in sort of overall quality. So my my extremely middle class, mechanical engineer dad, decided to put me into a private school down there called the Baylor School for Boys.
Whoa.
Yeah, right. And this was all boys. And it was a former military academy, believe it or not. So it was very regimented up until I think the early '70s, like during the Vietnam conflict, they were having problems getting people to pay the tuition to go to military. Military was very unpopular in those days. So they said, maybe we'll drop the military thing, but we'll keep the boys thing, and it was all boys academy, and it was a good education, a really good, solid education. And then about 4 years after I left, they said, what if we allowed girls to come in? We get twice the tuition. So they went co-ed like right after I left. So I had this really kind of, bizarre single sex education. And I was like, that was really a weird thing to go through. And I'm glad they went ahead and went co-ed. So
did that give you problems later on? I know single sex schools when they had single sex schools, they have a little bit of difficulty slightly later on in life conversing with the opposite sex.
Well, that's exactly the thing. 100%. Yeah, because you're being socialized in that time, and when you're going through puberty and the change of life, this is when you sort of feel, how do you speak to members of the opposite sex or whomever you're attracted to, same sex, whatever, but you're completely cut off from half of the population. So it takes you a good, extra decade or so to figure out how to speak to people. I went through, my active dating life was probably in my 30s when it should have been in my high school years. It was much later, but it was what it was, and it was also a very athletically focused school too. And I certainly was into solitary sports like hiking or kayaking or anything like. And I'm a runner too. I've done some distance running, but I was not a good team sports guy. So the thing that I found to get out of my athletic requirement was to be in all the school plays. So I went into the theater department, and that got you out of athletics, so you could go be a thespian. I thought, that's a great deal. I love that. And because, when you do a play, you need to have women characters in it. So they would borrow girls from the girls' academy down the road, and you could actually, coexist with people who are not only, Christian males. It was an interesting time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So what plays did you do? What sort of plays were they? Were they the classics or were they musicals?
Not too. No, we weren't into musicals in that time. But it was everything from Shakespeare to. I'm trying to even think now. Camino Real, As You Like It. On Floor of the Cuckoo's Nest.
As You Like It, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I went to see it at the Old Vic in London.
Oh yeah.
I'm English.
Yeah.
Right? Now,
go ahead.
They might as well been speaking Swahili.
Yeah.
Because most of it went above my head.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand a word of it.
The language is tough, and also,
which made it even more difficult to understand.
Well, and also we're in, I was in high school at the time, so we're learning these words off the page and sort of repeating them phonetically and have no idea what we're even saying, half the time. It's like, what is and there was an instructor there who was well-versed in it, of course. So he would kind of translate, okay, so what that means is this, this, and this. But yeah, you're like, you're almost doing it as a phonetic, it's almost like a musical sort of thing. You kind of like let the language kind of wash over you and sort of try to pick up all the plot points as you go, which is good. It was good, solid training for somebody in high school. I was really glad to sort of have exposure to that. But I had no aspirations to be a Shakespearean actor. I barely speak the language myself, But that kind of also got me started performing, so I was being on stage in front of people, which is something that served me well later as a professional musician, which is what I ended up being later on. And then when I went away to college, I just started playing bass guitar, which is my chosen instrument, sort of only as a senior in high school. It came to it quite late. So when I went to college, I was in no position to sort of say, oh, I'm going to be a music major. I didn't have that kind of information yet. So I went as an engineering student. I was a biomedical engineering major for the first 2 years of my college. And then I realized that all the people in that were like officer training, military people. And I was like, yeah, this is not my crowd. These are not my people, I don't think. I don't know if you can tell the haircut, like I wasn't cut out to be a military type, So I ended up graduating with a psychology degree, but mostly what I was doing was majoring in college radio. We had a big college radio station this was down in New Orleans, Louisiana, Tulane University. The station there called WTUL, and I became the music director of that station. So I was dealing with concert promoters. I was dealing with record labels who were promoting their artists to us. When the artists would come through, I would interview them on mic, on the air. And then when I graduated from that, that's when I went into the music business. I became a publicist for Epic Records, and got into it that way. And still sort of realizing, my fascination. I was always fascinated with music. I always liked music, anything musical. But as I got into the business, I realized, this isn't really about music so much as it's about marketing. It was they're selling a product, so it was like a marketing company. So after I did that for like 3 years, I kind of rose to the ranks from making coffee to ended up having a corporate Amex card by the time I was done with it. I said, I really want to play music. I want to be creative. So I dropped out of that. I knocked around London actually for about a year and a half there because I had a place to stay, and played music in pubs, making £37.50 a man playing Stones covers. That was eye-opening and educational as well. So then that's when I decided, or if I'm really going to try to do this, I need to get my musical education filled in. I need to really go to music school and learn, because the ritzy prep school I told you about, the all boys academy, had no music program. There was no music program there.
But I had a theater department.
They had the theater department, right, but no music. So like all the stuff that I learned was like from taking private lessons with a guy who charged me $15 a lesson, or or studying from books, that kind of thing. Of self-taught. And then so I decided to, after my travels to London, I realized also the home office had kind of wanted me to go home at that point. It's like, you've been here long enough, nice having you, but just off you go. So I came back to Boston. I went to Berklee College of Music, and that's when I really got my music degree together and got the skill sets filled in, the gaps filled in that I needed to, if I was going to make an actual go of it as a full-time player. But even with that, it's it's a real gamble trying to be a professional performing artist in any field.
Yeah.
So I knew I had the skill sets, or at least I thought I had the skill sets to sort of break into it. But still, then you need a lot of perseverance and a lot of luck. A lot of things have to go your way to see if I can, make an actual go paying the rent, playing the bass. And as I mentioned to you briefly, before the mic's heated up here, I haven't had a day job since 1995. So I've been able to pay the bills, keep the lights on, keep the heat on since that. So after I got out of music school, about 3 years of doing like temp secretary work where I was typing resumes, for people. And then like there was a sort of the balance kind of tipped one day, and I was able to go full time playing music. And that was just September 95. And I haven't had a day job since.
What was that gig? What was the one that set you off on that track of paying the rent and not needing to go and do other stuff?
I would love to tell you that it was one, but it wasn't one. It was, and to this day, I'm a freelance musician. So after every gig, you're unemployed. Until the next booking, you're unemployed. So it's a combination of accumulation of contacts and freelance jobs. At that time, I was working with the first sort of like classic soul rock and roll group that I was working with in and around the New York area was the Shirelles. So, we would go out and do jobs at the weekend. We would drive up to Massachusetts and went back, drive out to Pennsylvania and back, go out to Long Island and back, so that would sort of, cover a weekend. And then you would play maybe in the house band at a jam session band, that would might be a $50 gig on a regular Monday, you know what I mean? And then a recording session here and maybe a live gig there. And by the end of it, suddenly, and I was also working with a bunch of singer-songwriters at that time, so at the end of the month, hopefully you've paid the rent. And I was also, very conscious of keeping my overhead really low. so that I was able to sort of, survive in those early years and keep the rent paid. And then after, as your client base builds, then I do my joke is I do weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs, all these these private party gigs that pay a lot of money, for a Saturday night. I do a lot of concerts. I do a lot of classic soul, classic rock and roll sort of people. I don't know if you read my little bio thing, but I've appeared as a substitute musician in 12 different Broadway shows. Over the years, I've played with 50 inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame over the years, so like it's a constantly moving, increasing client base. And
so tell me a bit about Broadway.
Yeah.
What was your first gig?
The first Broadway gig.
Show? What was that?
It's a show called Rock of Ages, which I don't know if you heard of. Yeah, it's an 80s rock musical. So what happened was a gentleman got the chair in that band as the full-time bass player. His name is Winston Roy, and I'd met Winston at a networking meeting. It was called the Bass Brunch. I met him at the Bass Brunch, and then he saw me playing in the house band. It was a $50 gig on a Monday night at midnight. It was the house band for a jam session at a club called the Bitter End, which is still in operation since 1960 in New York City, legendary club. And he just asked me on a break, like, "Hey man, would you ever think about subbing on a Broadway show? This show is kind of like doing a rock concert every night for 1,000 people. You had to memorize the whole book." So like he knew I was a good enough player because he'd just seen me play, and he'd also sort of, I guess he knew about my music school background or whatever. But he was just kind of asking because Rock of Ages, in the 12 shows that I've done since then, I realized it was a very unique situation because the band is on stage, we're in costume, we're in makeup, the entire score is memorized, we have like some choreography to do, we have lines, that kind of thing. So, but once you're in Midtown New York, where all the Broadway theaters are, then you start meeting the other theater guys, and then they maybe sub for this guy, maybe sub for that person, sub for this lady. It kind of what I thought was fascinating was at that point in New York for almost over 15 years. At that point, I'd been a professional musician from New York. And then when I first got into Midtown to the Broadway scene, suddenly I'm meeting a whole new group of people that I'd never met before. And this Manhattan Island, I'm sure there's 8 million people here, but the island's only 6 miles long or something. How have I never met you before? We're both professionals in the same industry in the same town, but it's like this sort of insular little community unto itself. That and it was very fascinating to sort of work my way into that whole scene.
Well, I guess they go to different places. I mean, I guess they're in a theatre every night, and then
right.
they don't need to go out and sort of panhandle or busker on the street corners.
What are you saying about me?
Well, no, but like they're
you're right. You're right, but what are you saying about
a regular job, as it were?
They do, and also it's a union job too. And the local 802 American Federation of Musicians Union has a great contract. So if you are the chair holder, meaning you're the regular bass player for Rock of Ages, you're only required to be there 50% of the time. 50. You only have to be there half the time, and you're allowed to sub out all the rest of your time up to 50% and still keep your regular chair. So, most people don't sub out that much, but they have the option. And Winston, the bass player from Rock of Ages, he was touring with the band Soule Asylum. So he was constantly going out, coming back, going out, coming back. So that show ran a really long time on Broadway, about 5.5 years. And I think I did close to 300 performances subbing for him over that time. And each of the players tends to have 4 or 5 subs available for themselves, so they can go do other gigs out of interest, so they can take time off for their mental health. Because you play the same show eight times a week, for a year, you start to get a little mental. Or if they have other gigs too.
Some muscle memory there with your fingers, I guess.
It can be, yeah, but it's also a different. This is the other reason too why I think I was meeting people for the first time that were in the theater world is because it's a slightly different skill set. Because what you have to do is to be able to play the exact same passage the exact same way each time. They really value consistency. They don't like mistakes. They don't like improvisation. They don't want to hear what you think about this score.
They don't want
you
your trumpet jumped into the mix.
no. They want you to sound like the person that you're subbing for as much as you can. And that's a very interesting specific skill set. And what happens is like, yeah, you do get this muscle memory because sometimes, you know, as you're sort of in a performance and for the 100th time you're playing this show, you have this moment where your brain just goes white. You just completely go to the white room and you're like, I have no idea. Not only do I know, yeah, not only do I know not know what note is next, but I'm pretty sure I don't know what day this is or what my name is. I'm just like, you just kind of like, you blank out. And then your hand, so many times your hand goes like, oh, it's here. Like it just gives you the gift. It's a G note. Like, oh, thank you. You know, and you go through this little emotional miniature panic. You know, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you know,
You know how the panic look?
Well, hopefully you don't do that on stage. You try to keep it to yourself, you know, but it's internally you're screaming like, oh, yes, thank you. So yeah, thank God for muscle memory. It's bailed me out of many a jam.
So you did nearly 300 performances of Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
What was your favourite stand-in, or your favourite job
Of the Broadway stuff?
The Broadway stuff? Yeah.
I loved Rock of Ages. I loved that show because it was fun. You know, we were pretending to be 80s rock stars, you know, flipping our hair around for 2.5 hours a night and wearing makeup and, you know, throwing the horns and like, yeah, you know. It was a blast. It was so much fun. And then some other shows. There was another one called Hedwig and the Angry Inch that I subbed on, and same sort of deal. The band was on stage in makeup, in costume, memorized. That one I was singing on as well as playing. Um, it was just great fun, you know, because I do specialize as a live performance musician. But then there was another one. There was a SpongeBob musical, which I don't know. I don't know if you heard about, but you know that one.
The musical, but I haven't been to see.
Oh, it was amazingly fun because the score was written by they farmed out all the songs to famous songwriters. So it was Aerosmith, David Bowie, Flaming Lips, you know, Plain White Tees, like all these amazing people wrote the score. Olita Adams wrote one of the songs. So it's just an absolute blast to play. You know, I was in the pit that whole time. I wasn't visible to anybody, but I was playing downstairs and just having the time of my life. It was such a fun score to play, you know. So they're definitely rewarding. I subbed on Spider-Man too, you know, and the score was written by the blokes from U2, you know. So that was a really interesting show to play. Probably the most infamous musical of all time because, you know, of the things that had gone wrong with it. It got quite famous for all the technical problems they had and some injuries on set and that kind of stuff. But man,
didn't it kind of flop, that one?
Well, I mean,
it certainly didn't make it across the pond.
It was here's the thing with that show. It was the most expensive musical of all time. I think the final tally was like $75 million it cost. And when I was there, it ran on Broadway for, I think, almost 3 years, counting their extended, they had a really long extended preview process for almost like 8 months or 10 months or something crazy because they kept changing it. And that was part of the infamy of the thing. It was like, this is the show that won't open because they, but the whole time they're running for paying audiences. And when I got there, you know, they broke a record. I think it was during holiday week because they had this theater sat almost over 2,000 people. I think it was 2,200 seats or something. But they broke a record for the all-time record for the Broadway gross for the week. I forget what it was. It's like $3 million or something they made in 1 week.
Ooh.
You know, because they'd sold the thing out during, so it didn't recoup. It didn't make all 75 million of it back. But, if you're selling $3 million worth of seats in a week, that's successful. It just didn't have like the right sort of long range marketing plan, I think. I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not in that business for a reason. I'm never going to make a good, show producer. It's not going to, I don't have the nerve for it, I don't think.
I guess that takes an awful lot of nerve to sort of throw that amount of money at one play and or one musical, and you're not quite sure whether it's going to.
I think if you're going to throw that kind of money, you have to have that kind of money that doesn't bother you. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to invest $1 million, that's got to be like money that however much money you would take to a casino to gamble, just to play with,
Yeah.
So you got to,
for money.
Yeah. For me, it's about 20 bucks. You're like, I can afford 20 bucks in a casino. But I'm not going to put $1 million in a Broadway show because I just don't have it, well, I don't have it at all, but I certainly don't have that kind of money to lose. Let's put it that way.
So what was the least favorite one you did on Broadway?
I hate to speak ill of anyone because these are all still my friends and colleagues who I hope to work with again and again. But there were some difficult times. Some shows are just harder to play. Some shows are like depending on who you're subbing for, sometimes they wouldn't have you in that often. So you would never sort of build up the muscle memory we were talking about a minute ago. Like, so each time you went in, it was almost like the first time. And I'll say this. So of the 12 Broadway shows that I've done, each first performance, the first time you go in there, that's the worst performance of your life. It's because what they do is they give you a copy of the score, or very often like a copy of a video of the conductor. It's like a conductor cam. It looks exactly like what you see at my screen right now. And there's a guy waving his arms or a lady waving her arms, and you learn that. And they say, like, whenever you're ready, come in and play. So you take about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe about a month to prepare. And you have to over prepare because you need to sort of be aware of things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go haywire. Somebody's going to drop something. They're going to flub a line. So you have to be over prepared to sort of be willing. So you've done a month worth of prep work and you go in, there's no rehearsal. You go in and you do a live show for paying customers and you get one shot at it. Whoa. And after the end of one shot, the conductor either says, yes, you will be allowed to rejoin us again, or no, thank you very much for playing and we'll see you never. So you don't know, that your hourly rate, for what you've done for that first show, like you've made a good $2.50 an hour or something, so if you get past the first show, then you've got a chance to sort of like, get your feet under you, maybe make some money over time. But that first show is terrifying. You have to like wear a diaper to that first show. It's awful.
Because I guess it's something like you've got the score, so you know the timing and everything there.
Yep.
But then it's also directed to what's going out in the auditorium.
Correct.
If they're giving you a bit of a standing ovation, then you've got to slacken off before you start again. And you wait for that baton to come down.
You got to follow the baton. That's exactly right. You got to follow the conductor, and where they go, that's where you go, and it's again, it can be different every night. And also, I've been practicing with this conductor video on my computer screen, just like I'm looking at you right now, and I'm listening to my headphones just like I'm listening to you right now. But when you get into the theater, suddenly you've got live sound, you've got people moving around, you've got, technicians coming through the pit, you're like looking around, there's distractions, there's, and then somebody knocks over a waste paper basket or something, like what, and then you've missed a cue or you've missed it, you've flubbed a line, and the conductor's looking at you like, I don't know if this one's not going to work out, so it's just terrifying. It's just terrifying.
And then I guess once they do invite you back for another go, at least you've got a bit of an idea using the first one as your rehearsal, I suppose.
Right.
But they don't give you a chance to rehearse. I mean,
No,
with the
I got a rehearsal.
in there.
No, I got a rehearsal at Hedwig. I got a rehearsal there, but the rehearsal wasn't for me. They were rehearsing a new principal actor. So they said, "Hey, there's going to be a put-in rehearsal. Would you like to play it?" I was like, "Oh yes, please. Let me do it once," without 1,000 people looking at me.
The audience and everything.
Right.
Excellent.
And then
So,
once you make it past the first one, you're still on probation for a bit. You have to really prove that you have the consistency they're looking for before then they call that point, then you become what they call a designated sub. And then after that, they're allowed to sort of call you at any time. And then, but there was one show which shall remain nameless, which I did for about a year. I was successful on for about a year, and then they fired me at the end of the year. I was like, "Excuse me, what happened?"
where'd that come from?
I never really got a full right. I never really got a full explanation other than sort of like they'd kind of wanted me to play more like the regular guy, but they hadn't told me that, sort of like they weren't really giving me notes as I went. So they're kind of like building up the resentment, and then they're so like, "No more." I'm like, "Well, if you had told me, I would have made an adjustment." It was a kind of a communication problem, I think. But and then when something like that happens, and I've been fired from so many gigs over the years. It's just the nature of the business, because they want somebody who's got a different color shoes, or they need somebody who's got a different color bass, or very often it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it does. You can definitely screw things up, but so you almost can't kind of take it personally in a way. I mean, you obviously have to always put your best professional foot forward, but what I say to people is like, I've been fired from gigs as often as I've been the person hired to replace the person who's been fired. Like it kind of almost evens itself out in the end. But when you get fired from a really big gig like that, like Broadway show, or there's a couple of other like major acts that I got fired from, it just, you're gutted by it. It really, it destroys your sense of,
especially if you don't know why they've done it.
yes. And P.S., you almost never know why, and even if they said, "We don't like your haircut," I'm like, "Really? Was that really why you fired me?" Like, it was something else. You're like, "No, what they really fired you with was because their cousin plays bass and he became available and he worked for half what they're paying you."
Yeah.
That's what, but they're not going to tell you that, like you find that out later. But what happens, like, especially when I got fired off the Broadway show, it shook my confidence so much that when I went back to Rock of Ages, when I'd been very successful there for a long period of time, suddenly I was like questioning, do I know how to play this show? Like I'm making stupid mistakes because I kind of, they put the fear into me, like it gave me the tremors almost, and that takes time to sort of like rebuild your confidence and sort of get back to doing what you already know how to do, so it's not for the meek. This business.
I guess it must be pretty tough if I guess those 12 shows were over a period of time. They weren't sort of 12 shows in a year that one week you're on Rock of Ages, the next you're on SpongeBob.
Right. No, the most I've had going simultaneously is 3, I think, at a time. And they kind of circle in and out because this show closes and that show opens, and the guy who used to suffer at this show now works at that show, and that kind of thing. So I don't think I've had to maintain more than 3 or maybe 4 books at a time, because there is a maintenance cost. You have to really sort of keep the things up. Like currently I'm subbing at Jersey Boys, and Jersey Boys at the end of the show is the story of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. So at the end of the show, right. Yeah, this show's played all over the world. It's like a huge hit. It ran on Broadway for like 10 years, and now it's running off Broadway. It's for like, it's been open for like 15 years, I think. So at the end of the show, the band, we're on stage and there's choreography. And I have to do a whole dance routine with the cast with my bass in my hand, and I've been playing bass for, 40 years now. I've been dancing for about 10 minutes, like I don't have the experience to do this. And, I had to learn a combination, which it's like 90 seconds long. It's a minute and a half long. Right. And the rest of the cast, they're dancing 2.5 hours, dancing, singing, acting, and I got to come out for 90 minutes. I'm like, where's right foot, left foot? What note am I playing? It's comical.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
It's
Slew, quick slew.
I'm telling you, it's walking and chewing gum at the same time. Like I almost can't do it, but that was the hardest thing about that show is learning how to dance, not learning the bass parts. Really funny.
So did you ever get a chair?
I've had chairs off Broadway. So in New York and off Broadway, here's how I describe off Broadway. Off Broadway is the same amount of work as on Broadway, but for less money.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's the only difference.
In a
smaller theater, exactly right.
Exclusive.
Right, that's what it is. So
you get 2,000 people go to the show in Broadway, but when you're off Broadway, it's a smaller audience and sort of more into.
Yeah. The off-Broadway houses, I think, have to be less than 500. So, they're 499 seats. They actually unbolt one of the chairs so they can fit the union rules, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had a show at the Atlantic Theater called This Ain't No Disco, which was about the heyday of Studio 54 and those kind of things. And that was a limited run at the Atlantic. So I've been a chair holder, but not an official Broadway chair holder yet. And most of my friends my colleagues, have had a similar sort of experience. Like you don't get your first chair for 10 years, 12 years of being in the scene, subbing, and I started in 2009. So yeah, we lost a year or two because of the pandemic, but I'm about, I shouldn't be shocked. Yeah. Like the phone could ring any minute now, or it could never ring. You know what I mean?
There is that to it. It depends on who you upset or who you get on really well with.
True. 100% true. It's all about personal connections and, and being good at what you do as well. So, but then luck, because now, a music director or a composer needs to get a Broadway show and say, oh, I need to hire a band. Who are like, well, Ivan, he's a friend of mine, maybe I'll hire him, so a lot of things have to go right in a row for you.
Yeah, get all your ducks line, and if they drop into place at the right time, you're available. The show's up and coming,
all of that,
bump, and you're in, and that's
all of that
chair, and then you hang on to it like grim death, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, they do. Yeah. And the people that are in that community, it's almost like being in a fraternity or sorority. Like they've paid so many dues to get there that they really, and they're good at what they do. They're all, amazingly talented people, but they're staying. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah, they're not going to give it up. Well, what would you? I mean, it's your bread and butter, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Of course. I mean, think of what other music jobs, a symphony orchestra or a Broadway pit, what else a regular paycheck as a musician? Nothing,
Not a lot. No.
Very unique situation.
So you've had your fair leg at Broadway. What about session stuff?
Yep, do that too.
You say you've had a pop at about 50 Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
How'd you get into that?
It's one foot in front of the other.
You just loiter around somewhere like Abbey Road Studios and somebody drags you in. Play that.
I've heard stories of people doing that. Like Jaco Pastorius, the great bass player, used to hang out at a place called Unique Studios in Times Square, and he would just hang out in the lobby with his bass. Like, need anything? Anyone? But most of my rock and roll Hall of Famers, those are mostly live credits more than studio. I do studio work, and now because of the pandemic, it's made all of us home recording studio engineers now. So I record right here at my desktop, and I can send people songs by bass tracks by email now. But the live stuff, that's where most of the Hall of Famers start. So the first Hall of Famer I played with was back in New Orleans when I was in college, and it was Bo Diddley. And Bo would come through town just by himself and use a local pickup band. And it was the kind of thing where like I was dating the booking agent, and she said, I need to book a band. I was like, well, I play bass. So I had to audition for the guitar player who was leading the band. And I think the criterion was if I could play at all, I had the gig. Because I knew the lady was booking the thing, and all of Bo's songs are as genius as they are. Most of them are one chord. So you're just kind of playing that Bo Diddley beat, jank, 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 jank. And he only played in 3 keys the whole show. It was amazing, And then when I got to New York, I started friend of a friend, that knew that I knew a friend from New Orleans who had a cousin lived in New York and was going out, and that cousin was going out with the music director for the Shirelles at the time. And got the word like, oh, this kid's new in town. He just graduated music school. And he came to see me play at again, $50 blues gig after midnight at a bar in Manhattan. And I knew he had an envelope in his hand. And the envelope had charts for the Shirelles show and a cassette tape of the show. And I knew that he was going to look at me like, because he knew that I graduated from music school. So he if I could play at all, he was going to give me the gig. Like, here, I need a sub. He handed me the envelope. Yeah, he handed me the envelope. I had a week to learn the show. And then again, no rehearsal. And we drove in a van to play at a family fun fair at a church parking lot in Massachusetts. It was like a 5-hour drive. And then I just, because I'd gone to music school, I knew how to prepare the book and read the charts, So I just played the show. And they were like, you did great. The first time out, you played it exactly the way we wanted to. The drummer for that band was a guy named Crusher Green. Crusher. And he was the music director for Wilson Pickett for 35 years. He was Wilson's music director and drummer. And he was also in a band called the Uptown Horns Review. And the Uptown Horns needed a bass player like last minute for this big show they were doing at the Bottom Line in New York City. And Crusher was like, this kid that plays with the Shirelles, he just showed up the first day, did his homework, and knew the music. So that's the kind of guy you need. Plus, he liked the way I play, so he recommended me to the Uptown Horns. They handed me the same thing, a cassette tape, said, here, learn these songs. We have one rehearsal, and then we're going to do a show with, the show was with Peter Wolf from the Jay Giles Band. We backed him up, Vernon Reid from Living Colour, Bernard Fowler, who sings with this band from your side of the pond called the Rolling Stones. I don't know if you heard of them. That was the first show. Like, show up and do that. So then they became, you're right, the Rolling Hood. So they were the horn section on the Rolling Stones Steel Wheels tour. That was when they were also the horn section on James Brown Living in America, B-52's Love Shack. They were a big studio horn section. And as such, they became like the pickup band of choice for when the R&B stars would come to New York City and they needed a band. So when I started playing with their band, then suddenly I met Sam Moore from Sam and Dave. I met Eddie Floyd. I met Rufus Thomas and Carla Thomas. Like they were having us back up Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. They were having us back up all these artists as they came through town. So suddenly the CV, the resume starts going like this, And I didn't change anything. I'm the same person, but suddenly like, somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And then, 30 years later, I go, oh, I've played with 50 Rock and Roll Hall of Famers in retrospect. You can't plan that.
No, it just happens.
It just happened,
Being in the right place at the right time, knowing the right person to give you that go.
Over 30 years. Yeah, that's that's the thing. You got to keep doing it too. And now, so every year when they announce the new inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I look and see who they are, because I see like one of the, I don't know that they're going to get in this year. I hope they do. But the New York Dolls, they've been nominated, right? So if the New York Dolls get in, I've played with David Johansen from the New York Dolls, because I've played with him as David, and I played him as Buster Poindexter, who's his alter ego, So then my Rock and Roll Hall of Fame tally goes up by 1 if he gets in, and I haven't done anything different. Like, it just, the resume goes up, and I'm just like, I still have no more gigs. And I haven't played with David in years, but
But yeah, you got the tick in the box.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So that's happened over time too. Like, my stats have gone up without any further effort on my part at all.
So who was your favorite person to play for or play with?
Oh, so many. But I will say this, there's a special place in my heart for Sam Moore from Sam and Dave. So, I went on the road as his music director for 13 years. So we played just so many amazing shows. He's a true first tenor. He's got this amazing instrument. So because of that, he's got all these rock and roll stars who came after him, you know, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, who idolize him because he's got this amazing instrument. He doesn't practice, he doesn't warm up, he just opens his mouth and that voice is there. You're like, wow, you know, I'm a soul man. Hold on, I'm coming. All these amazing songs. So then in 2006, when I was his music director, he got a deal with Randy Jackson, who was one of the judges on American Idol as a record producer. He got signed to Rhino Records when he was, 70 years old, I think.
Oh.
And suddenly they did all-star duets with all of his friends and fans. So on this record, which P.S. I didn't play on, I was just doing the live dates, but the record, the special guests are Sting, Bruce Springsteen, Paul Rodgers, Wynonna Judd, Mariah Carey. Stop me anytime because it keeps going. It's like this long list of people.
Yeah. I'll pick all these up for you.
Yeah. Well, but you know, so standing next to Sam, I met these people, and you know, I met Robert Plant, I met Bono, I met The Edge, I met, you know, all these people, and he would just, I'm just standing there, you know, like, hi, he'd go, this is Ivan, this is my bass player, music director, and I go, nice to meet you, Bruce Springsteen, you know. And because he came before them, and because he has such an instrument, they never would ever come at him with any rock star ego. It was right out the window because they were meeting their idol. So I'm meeting my idol, but they're meeting their idol. So like we're all in a room together. It's like, hi, nice to see you. It was very, very, very extremely humbling and magical to hang out with Sam. And he's still around too. He's 86 years old. He sounds amazing. Crazy.
So is this where your book came from then? Am I Nearly Famous?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, Am I Famous Yet? Memoir of a Working Class Rock Star. Because that's what I am. I work for a living, you know, and I do rock starry kind of things sometimes. And then, as you say, I'm busking in the subway the rest of the time, or playing weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs, and whatever in between. So, you know, there are times when I'm standing next to Sam and we're going on stage with Sting, Sam's special guest Sting, and Elvis Costello, which happened. That happened. Yeah. We played the first Obama inauguration ball with Sting and Elvis. And I'm just like, what happened? You know, like, how did that happen? And then, you know, we ended up having to, that same night after having one of the craziest gigs of our lives, because it was the inauguration in Washington, D.C., everything was booked solid. There wasn't a hotel room to be found for 100 miles. So we had to take the train back to New York City. After the show, we got like a 3 a.m. train, which got us back to New York City like 6:30 in the morning. And because everything was booked, there were no cabs. There was no way to get the band from the venue back to the train station. So we had to walk at like 1:30 in the morning. It was 20 degrees outside. We're all carrying our instruments. We haven't just played the most amazing show of our lives. You know, just going like, it's, you know, feast or famine. It humbled you immediately, you know.
It brings you back down to earth a little bit.
Oh, immediately. I mean, I had a photo of me and Sting in my phone, you know, like I got this amazing photo, and I'm walking a mile to the train station in 20-degree weather in the middle of the night. So, you know, we're dripping wet too, because we've all sweated through our clothes for the performance. It was humbling. It was humbling, but beautiful and terrible at the same time, you know. So the book is just like stories like that. It's 1,000 stories like that, you know. And somebody was asking me the other day, is like, well, you only talk about all the bad stuff. I'm like, yeah, I don't look at it that way. It's kind of like a dark humor sort of thing, because when everything goes great, it's like, we had a great gig, we played well, the audience loved us, and we went home. Like, there's no story there, you know. There's always something to tell when something goes haywire, or, you know, somebody's acting crazy, or, you know,
something goes stage wrong.
Yeah, or the stage almost dumps you into the ocean because it's built on stilts on the side of a mountain. You know, there was that kind of crazy crap. You know, so yeah, the book is like story after story of all the madcap adventures of a working class musician through the years.
So, what has been your most memorable gig? What one have you really, really
There's been a couple of the all-time greats were with, I got to play Carnegie Hall twice with two different acts, and that's one of those sort of things like, that's considered to be the Mount Everest of musicianship. You get to play Carnegie Hall. And never mind, I was playing like a folk type, 4-chord songs. I was in Carnegie Hall, like this counts, I'm here, So that's one of those sort of pinch
kind of
yourself
like
moments.
the Grand Ole Opry, isn't it?
Yeah, well, funny you should say that. I played the Grand Ole Opry.
Whoa.
And I played with Sam. And it was Sam Moore with special guests, these legendary country artists, Laurie Morgan, Jody Messina, Travis Tritt, and Wynonna Judd. They all came and played with Sam. Like they came and did a duet with Sam, and then we stayed on stage, and I was the music director for this whole thing. And I got to play with all those artists live, in the Grand Ole Opry, the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. So like that's one of those moments, like you can't aspire to do that.
No.
It has to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And then that gig that I told you, the Obama inaugural ball with Sam and Sting and Elvis Costello, amazing. There was another one we did with Sam that was at the Tokyo Jazz Festival. I think it was maybe 2009. It was in front of 5,000 of our closest friends. It's a big auditorium. It was live on Japanese television. We had I think about a 15-piece band, and Sam was he was on fire. He was on fire. The whole building was bouncing up and down. And we got off stage and was like, was that amazing, or am I misremembering it? Like it was fun, but was it also great? And then we got to see the video later and we're like, oh, no, that was good. It was a good night. The band was kicking butt and Sam was in rare voice. He's like that all the time. He was in perfect voice, I should say. And a couple of things like that just become like these real memorable touchstone moments. Oh, the Obama thing. Okay, so we'll go back to that. When I was in high school at the All Boys former military academy I was telling you about, we had a talent show my senior year. And I started playing bass. I've been playing bass for like 6, so we're playing cover songs, So one of the songs we played, I think, was Metal, 4 horns, rhythm section, backup singers, the whole thing. So I, Every Breath You Take went really well. So I said to him, do you want us to back you up on Message in a Bottle? He's like, do you know it? I said, it's in C sharp, right? Because I played it in high school. Yeah, I know it. So I got to play that.
You played it.
Yeah, right. I'm sure I played it in a couple of weddings in between, but that was one of those things when you're in high school, sort of playing in a gymnasium for a talent show and playing a Police song because you're just like, those are your heroes.
Yeah.
Again, a short interval of 27 years till it happened, but then to play the song with the guy who wrote it and sang it, that was one of those moments. I have a picture up on my wall too. We're at rehearsal and he's teaching me one of his other songs. I think he's teaching me Brand New Day. So I have the bass next to my ear so I can hear the notes. And one of the background singers recognized the moment that was happening. So she just pulled out her phone and was like, click. So there's me and Sting just face to face on stage as he's teaching me one of his songs, and how do you describe something like that? What that means to me as a fan,
Yeah.
Great. And we've seen him several times since. He's a great, lovely bloke.
Yeah. Well, now it's recorded forever.
Yeah.
That story there won't ever be lost.
Yeah. It's indelible in my mind too. It's in the book, and now you've got it on video yourself. So I can't take it back.
Well, Ivan, I've really, really enjoyed this. Now I've got one more question.
Yes, sir.
Since you've been like this rock and roll almost famous god for about 4 decades.
Yeah.
Have you ever taken your guitar and smashed it?
Oh man,
Done the rock and roll thing of smashing up your guitar and kicking the stage apart.
You know the cover of the Clash album, London Calling, where Paul's like smashing the bass. Yeah. That bass is in pieces, and it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in Cleveland. I saw the bass. I like you. They got a picture of the album cover and the pieces of the bass. I'm just like, wow, not me. Well, my thing is, I need the bass tomorrow night. I can't afford to be, I can't afford to be smashing him and leaving him on the side of the stage like I'm done.
Yeah.
That's never been my destructive impulse. I tend to channel my rage through the music itself. I'll just play louder if I'm that angry, I guess, but no, I've never smashed an instrument on purpose.
Fair enough. Respect your instrument.
Yeah, right. Well, again, you need it for work tomorrow,
Oh, yeah. I mean, they cost a few bob, don't they? You can't go wasting money like that.
Well, there's famous stories about in Pete Townsend, if you ever read his book, because that was part of their shtick, was smashing the guitar. So what he got good at was taking the pieces and like, gluing enough pieces to get a guitar that'll work tomorrow night, because he's got another show to do. And he'd go on stage and the glue would still be wet, but he knew at the end of the night, smash it again,
Perhaps you just had the one to smash up and played another one.
Oh, man. I think, you go through, you have a parts guitar after a while. Like, oh, the pickup's still good on this one, and the neck's still good on that one, and the body's still good on that one. So you don't have to smash a brand new guitar every single night. It gets expensive. It gets quite dear.
Yeah. So how many guitars have you got?
Oh, man. I'm looking at about 20 of them right now. And I play 2 of them. I've got a whole rack of them here, and I regularly use like 2 of them,
Yeah.
There's one that stays in the bag. That's the gig bag that's by the front door. That's the A bass, the number 1 bass. So that's the one I use most of the time.
So what's the rest of them? Are they just a collection have you always kept every guitar you've ever played?
Yeah, I've only sold maybe 2 in 30, 40 years, Yeah, they're different styles. One of them's fretless, one's got a 5-string, I've got an 8-string, one's got glitter on it, one's got flowers on it. There's a white one, there's a black one, There's a different styles too, like the Fender Precision style is different from the Fender Jazz style, which is different from the Music Man style. So I have one of each of those, the Music Man style. So, and they accumulate after a while. They're kind of like old friends,
Yeah.
Hate to give them up. They're not worth very much, but I got them hanging out. They look impressive hanging on the wall,
Well, they're good to you.
Yeah.
They've given you a living for the last 40 years.
They've paid the rent for 20. Let's be official. Full time 20 since 95, so that's 27 years full time paying the rent. Not bad.
Not bad going.
Yeah.
For somebody who's not quite famous.
Definitely not famous. I talk about fame too, because fame is a tenuous thing. You can be world famous, or you can be. Let's put it this way: you can be wildly famous. Like there's a story I mentioned in my book about like Janet Jackson. I don't know Miss Jackson, but I'm saying like at one point in the '80s, she sold like 10 million copies of her record that came out. Control, that album. Which means in the United States alone, there's another 290 million people who don't know who you are and don't care. You know what I mean? So I don't, all the Hall of Famers all the names that I just dropped probably meant very little to my parents. They didn't know who they were. They weren't rock and rollers, so it wasn't their thing. So, and with the Rock of Ages thing, prime example. So we're on stage for Rock of Ages. So the audience is looking at us for 2.5 hours. The band doesn't move anywhere. All the other actors come on up, but we're there, upstage center. So when we come out the stage door, they're like, "Yay, sign my playbill," So we're famous up until the time we turn the corner on 7th Avenue. And then you melt back into obscurity immediately. You're only famous for half a block, a city block, and then that's it, So fame, you don't want to get too used to fame, until you get to a Sting level, there's nothing to claim at my point in life yet.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ivan. I've really, really enjoyed that.
Man, thank you for having me. Thanks for the insightful questions. I can tell you're really interested in talking about interesting people, and I really appreciate what you're doing. It's really nice.
You're welcome.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.